I initially started gardening with my grandfather, who was in his 90s when he came to live with us, and he had been a farmer during the Depression. And with him, I planted my first garden, and I just loved it, you know. Basically, I've been growing a garden ever since. This land was purchased back in the 60s, the mid-60s. And Greg and his then wife, Edie, came to Lopez, and they bought this acreage and other pieces that then connected to it. And it includes Irene's land and Zach's land and Edie's land, and we now connect to my son Raven's land too. So most of my children are right here. Basically, you know, what I've been doing ever since I've been on Lopez is just growing gardens. It's my favorite place to be, and when other things don't seem right in the world, my garden always feels good, like the place to be. And I like organic gardening, and I like feeding the family, and I don't do a very traditional style. I basically just let my garden seed itself, and I take away what doesn't work and leave what works, and sometimes that is successful and sometimes it isn't. But I remember seeing a documentary once about an old Russian woman, and she was a survivor of extreme poverty, but she said, "I always have my kale." And that's where I come from, that kind of ideal, is that I don't need fancy stuff. I can grow and regrow my kale and my chard, and I let all the flowers reseed, and I just feel like it's my survival you know, plan for any time in my life. At this particular garden, where I've lived now for quite a few years with Greg, I've been able to spread my wings a little, and I have a beautiful little vineyard with just 2 rows, but I take good care of it in hopes that someday I will have the perfect grapes for wine. Also, I have raspberries, beautiful raspberry patch that's separate from the main garden. We have a lot of fruit trees. We have peach trees, cherry trees, many different apple trees, nut trees. My joy this year is my tomatoes. My tomatoes are like 13 feet high in my greenhouse. I grow a lot of peppers, and I dehydrate them and grind them up and save them. So I eat peppers year-round from my garden, and I throw the peppers, mixed pepper, into almost everything we make for dinners. It feeds us pretty well, so we're happy, and I use most of those things for saving for the winter, including dehydrating and canning some. I'm kept pretty busy year-round with everything to do with this land. I love bouquets, and I work for Susan at Arbordown, and she makes very professional bouquets, and they're beautiful, and she grows flowers just for special occasions, but I'm okay with just a simple bouquet. I always have fresh flowers in my house. We live pretty self-sufficiently here. We get a dozen eggs or more per day. During the winter, I take my goats out and they forage for salal. In the summer months, I feed them different leaves from lots of different trees. They love willow, so I grew a willow hedge, and I harvest fresh willow for them every morning, and I try not to feed them anything that's not organic. I feel very fortunate to have my family close. I think it's kind of like an ideal situation. We're all very much in love with each other, and we celebrate together, and we party together. We do traveling together, and I feel like we have all the components for a pretty good life here to celebrate and enjoy the beauty of this amazing Lopez Island.
sailed into Fish Bay and tied up in an old derelict dock. And we got off the boat and started walking up the road. And 15 minutes later, I said, I'm gonna live here. We hadn't even seen anybody. There was just something about Lopez that said, I'm gonna live here. That was it. This is 1968. And we got the money to buy this piece of property that we're on right here now. And getting here to this island and being lifelong fascinated with Native American life and culture, I obviously turned on to the Northwest Coast, and lo and behold, Bill Holm was down at Camp Nor'Wester, carving every summer. It's hard to be around Bill Holm and not be totally inspired by the Northwest Coast people and by the art of the Northwest Coast people, So anyway, that got me started. I said, where do you get the tools, to do this carving? And he says, you have to make them, man. And so I thought, oh, wow, okay, well, I'll do that, So I set up and made my tools, and the carvers would see them and they say, oh God, I wouldn't mind one of them, man, make me one of them, Well, anyway, after a little while, I thought I gotta get into this or get out of it, Then I set up in a, kind of a semi-manufacturing mode and started manufacturing the tools. And in the end, I made thousands of tools and sold them all over the world, but mostly on the Northwest Coast and to a lot of Native people, a lot of the top-end carvers. They also helped in the revival of those crafts by the natives, because the natives had lost so much in that process. I'm glad that I have, helped with carving tools for schools for the Native people and stuff like that. And now the Native people are standing on their own, they're pretty darn strong, and they're coming on even stronger. The tools in the Northwest Coast are largely adze and crooked knife. They come in various curves. This is what I call a standard bend, and the interesting thing is it's like a French curve. So every radius can be done with this one tool. This piece is going to be the sun, and it's made as part of a triptych that I have going on that I call the human universe. We have the sun to warm us, we have the moon to cheer us through the nights, and we have the earth to nurture us. This is cedar. It's old growth cedar from Canada, and the moon I carved out of yellow cedar, because it just seemed more appropriate. The moon was painted with iridescent paints that show up the light and so reflects the moon. The piece on the bottom is the rock, Lopez. On top of that is the wolf, that's me. And I'm holding my son, Zach, who's coho salmon, and on top of that is the otter, and that's Irene. And she's got her daughter, Summer Moon, on one side, and her son, Cody, on the other hand, in her paws there. And above that is the frog. Frogs are everybody's friend. Above that is the kestrel hawk, and that represents the business. And out of the ear of the hawk is my first wife, Edie, who's Busy Sparrow. And then on top of the hawk is the Northwest Coast carver taking his tools and going away to carve. Out of the mouth of the carver is a raven holding the sun disk. That's our son, Raven. And on top of that is a cedar bark head ring for my daughter, Cedar Bow, and the headdress frontlet represents Native people. So that's this pole. And I was glad I did it before I had 5 grandchildren that I have to figure out how to put in there too, So anyway.